Okay, so interesting subject. Type 2 extension cables, are they a good idea? And is this one good? And I have to shout out to MCEV KELN, who've sent me this Type 2 single phase 32 amp cable, basically just to give it a review. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this away. So this is brand new. I've literally just unwrapped it, had all the nice plastic around here and everything, bubble wrap. I've unwrapped it. And we're going to give it a test, and then I'm going to give it away to one of my subscribers. So yeah, a little bit more about that at the end. So you can get these Type 2 extension cables. So but are they a good idea? Why would you need one? So you might be a bit confused, because if you look at a Type 2 cable, the ends, so let's get this the right way up. So we've got that end that goes into the charging, you know, your pod point or whatever, your charger, wall box, whatever. And then we got this end that goes into the car. Well, they fit into each other. Apologies, I have to fumble around with one hand, but just to prove the point. Yeah, so they fit into each other. Okay, so I've got a pod point and I've got a car, and let's plug it in just to show you my setup and just to go through things step by step. And what we're basically going to do is we're going to have a chat about charging theory and how the car knows the capacity of the cable that's plugged into it. So my pod point is 7 kilowatts. This is a 32 amp cable, which is 7 kilowatts, about 7.5. The car can actually, this Zoe can actually charge at 22 kilowatts. And I've got an energy monitor, and that's just connected on the wire that's supplying the pod point. And so we're charging at 7 kilowatts. Okay, perfect. So now what happens if we get the other cable? So we know that these fit into each other. So why don't we just plug this into here? Yeah, sorry, you can see that. Right, so that's plugged in there. Then I'm going to plug this end in the car. Okay, so the car's flashing, it's locked the cable in, it knows there's something there. So what's going to happen? Well, as you probably realised if you've looked into Type 2 extension cables, it's not going to charge, and there's a reason for that. So the car's still trying to charge, but it's not charging. If you have a quick look at the dash to show you what it's doing, it's doing some checks. Let's go over there. Ongoing check. So it's trying. It was charging a minute ago, but you plug in another Type 2 cable to daisy chain them, and it's not working. Okay, so why doesn't that work? And why shouldn't it work? Why is it a good idea that it doesn't work? So if we have a look in this socket, you'll notice that this pin on the right is pushed in. Well, it's shorter. It's not pushed in, it's shorter. We usually get a few questions of, my car's not charging, one of the pins has been pushed in, but it's normal. That is pushed in. A bit blurry, isn't it? Oh, that's a bit better. So why is that pin shorter? Well, it's so that doesn't work. So although the two ends of the cable do fit into each other, they're not a true plug and socket. And basically the pin is shorter, so within here that pin doesn't connect. Okay, so those two pins at the top, one of them detects when something is present, so it's a proximity pilot, so as in there is a cable plugged in. So when we plugged that in, the car knew that there was something there, and it was trying to charge. It was trying to communicate with the pod point. And then the other pin is the control pilot, and that is the communication between the car and the charge point in terms of how many amps it can draw as far as the pod point is concerned. So we've got two pins there. One is the car knows there's something plugged in, and the other one is the communication between the car and the charger in terms of charging rate. So that doesn't work because the pin's short. Okay, and it's a really good idea that doesn't work, because that is a 16 amp cable and that is a 32 amp cable. Okay, so And I can prove that because the car was charging at 7 kilowatts, yeah, 32 amps, which is about 7.5 kilowatts. So if I plug my 16 amp cable in, which is noticeably thinner, it is quite a bit thinner. Let's plug that in. I was a bit slow plugging that in there. The locking pin kind of caught the plug, but so it's flashing, it's trying to communicate, and then we'll just see what happens. So the pod points clicked there, so they've done their communication, the pod points turned on the supply, and the car's starting to charge. So that should charge at 16 amps. So there we go, 3.6 kilowatts. Okay, so you can imagine if this cable and that cable were daisy chained together, or let's imagine there's 3 in a line, however many you like, and the one in the middle is a 16 amp, you'd be able to draw 32 amps through a 16 amp cable. And that's basically why you can't daisy chain type 2 cables. It's been designed out, it's been thought of. When they designed this system, they made those pins shorter, so when you daisy chain the cables, they don't connect. Similar if you've got like a 3-pin plug with a type 2 on the end, if you put another lead on the end of it, it won't work. Okay, so that's interesting. So the next thing is, how does the car know how much power to draw? Because there's another element here. So we've got the PP, which detects when there's something plugged in, and we've got the CP, which is communication from the pod point as to how much current can be drawn. But there's another aspect here. So let's just disconnect that cable and we'll demonstrate this. So when you plug in, the car knows that there's something connected, but it also knows the capability of that cable, and it's quite cool. I'm going to do a little demo with a meter. This is going to be slightly awkward, but we'll give it a go. Right. So basically, this is going to be tricky with one hand. One moment. Right. So, okay. Right. Let's get that. Okay. So between 2 of the pins, so I'm on the middle, so this is the one that goes into the car. This is the PP here, and that's blurry. Right, there we go. So if I'm on resistance on the meter, so if we put those across resistance, and we actually get them to connect with one hand, we get around 220 ohms. Here we go. Okay. And this is a 32 amp cable. So if I get my 16 amp cable, do the same thing. So I'm going middle, which is earth, and then I'm going up to the top, which is slightly awkward. Now we've got around 680 ohms. Okay. So there's a resistor inside here, and that resistor is different depending on the current carrying capability of the cable. So when the car wants to charge, what happens is you plug the 32 amp cable in, the car says, oh, I know that the capability of the cable that's plugged into me is 32 amps. And then the pod point says I'm capable of 32 amps. The car takes as a max the lower of those, and it knows it can charge up to that as a max. Obviously it might be nearly full and not need to charge much, but yeah, it'll charge as much as it can up to the lowest figure it's been given, whether that's down the CP from the charge point or the resistor that's on the PP wire. Okay, so that's quite cool. So the car knows the capability of the cable that's plugged into it. Okay, cool. So that's worth knowing. So now the extension cable. So if you've got like a short, if you've got a tethered charger, mine's untethered because I charge type 1 cars and all kinds of stuff. So I went untethered, but if you've got a tethered charger and it's too short, you can get these extension cables. So we had a chat about the pin length, and effectively these leads use a socket, passing aeroplane, use a socket instead of the normal type 2 charge point end. So they use one of these sockets, to enable you to extend it. Now, some people aren't happy doing that, but that's why I'm doing this video. We're going to test this and see how it works, and what's going to happen if we have the 16 amp cable plugged into the pod point, and then we put this in, which is 32 amps. If we extend it, so remember, the car knows the capability of the cable that's plugged into it. So this should be a 32 amp cable. So should we give it a test? Just double check. So it should be 220 ohms. Just plugging this in here. Sorry, it's difficult to record and do this as well. Come on. Trying to get a good connection. It's tricky. So have a look at this. So I said this is a 32 amp cable, so we should have 220 ohms. And look at what we've got. Yeah, there we go. Is there anything there? No. There's nothing there. Now, what do you think will happen if I get my 32 amp cable? Let's say we're going to extend this 32 amp cable. Say I want to put my cars in a different place, or I've got a new car and the charge point's in the charging socket on the car is at the other end, and I want to reverse it and whatever. So I've got my 32 amp cable and I've plugged it into this extension. Right. So now, because we're on the socket, we have to go to the other pin because we're the other way around. Sorry, this is a bit clumsy. I don't have any assistance. See, I've got 220 ohms. Oh, I can leave that in there. Now I'm going to unplug the blue lead. See, it goes to 0. So people don't like these because it says, they say it masks the car detecting what cable's plugged into it. But actually, as I've just proven, the car still knows what's plugged into it. And if I plug my, oh, I'm going to have to go and get the other end, aren't I? If I plug the 16 amp cable into it, right, so I plugged in my 16 amp cable and we got 680 ohms. So the car can still detect the capability of the cable, and I'm going to do a little demonstration here, even with the extension cable behind it, because that resistor is going between earth and PP. Actually, we want the 32 in, don't we? So yeah, so the car can still detect that it's got let's say a 16 amp cable plugged into it. Yeah, we want to use the 16, don't we? So I'm getting in the muddle here. Right, so the test is, that's a 32 amp extension cable, but we're purposely going to plug a 16 amp lead in the pod point, and it should still know that it's 16 amps. Right, so I've got my 16 amp lead, I've got my 32 amp extension. So people have a concern that because the car is able to detect the capability of the cable that's plugged into it, that the car will try and draw 32 amps. But that doesn't happen, and the reason is the car can still detect through the extension cable that that's a 16 amp cable, and therefore it will only draw about 3.5 kilowatts, which is 16 amps. So these extension cables are really interesting. Obviously you wouldn't want to buy, and I don't think you can buy, a 16 amp extension cable, because then the car would detect, it might detect 32 amps. Like if we had the blue one and then we had a 16 amp extension, you could get into a dangerous situation. But I'm not aware that you can buy them, so that doesn't happen. So as far as I'm concerned, these cables are pretty good. This one is really nicely made, and it works. The car still draws the right amount of current because it can detect the cable that's behind it. So yeah, I've never tested this before. I thought I'd do it. I thought it was interesting. It was really nice of these guys to send me this cable. They just sent it to me for free and said, have a look at it, do a review and see what you think of it. And yeah, and I'm going to give it away, which is cool. So let's have a better look at this cable. Right. Just disconnecting this. So one of the things that concerns me with any kind of extension or adapter is moisture ingress, because you've got an extra connection, you've got extra potential for heat. Obviously, usually things are locked in. So if this was a socket like on my pod point, there's obviously a locking pin there. So it is well made. There is the risk of extra moisture, but you know, there's a risk of moisture kind of getting in anything really. So it doesn't lock in place. So that's an interesting point. So what happens if the cable comes out when it's charging? Shall we see what happens? And let's use a 32 amp one. Let's do a proper test. So if we plug a 32 amp cable into the charge point, okay, and get this charging, because as we know, this cable is going to be locked in here, and the car knows it's there as it's gone to sleep. The car doesn't know it's there because it's got no resistor in it, has it? Because what it detects is the cable behind it. Okay, yeah. So you can plug that in there, nothing happens. And then when we plug the one that's the sort of proper type 2 cable into here, yeah. So we've got a clip and it's locked it in place. Okay, cool. So we'll let that start charging and then we'll see what happens. So the pod point's clicked. So effectively, just in case it's of interest, the car and the pod point do a handshake. Obviously the pod point's got relays inside it. Same with like a granny cable, like a 3-pin, whatever kind of charging equipment. The pins are not live, so the communication happens. Then when everybody's happy, and the car and the charge point have done their communication and it's happy, then the charge point will turn on its relays. You'll get mains. The car will do some tests on that mains, checking the voltages and things like that. And the car being happy, it will start to charge basically. Just a sort of quick overview. So it's charging, it's using the extension cable, it's charging at a 32 amps, a bit of reflection there, but about 7.5 kilowatts. So what happens when I pull this out? Is there going to be sparks and flames? Well, I hope not, because I'm holding it. Right, so I'm just going to edge this out real slowly to see if we can... so I pulled it out a little bit. The pod point's just clicked off. The car stopped charging, and the energy meter's just gone down to 0. That took a second. So basically, we just stopped. And that's one of the other reasons why the pin is short. Apart from preventing you from daisy chaining, similarly, if you had if the lock broke on your car, so the cable just pushed in and it wasn't locked for any reason, or some lout decided to pull it really hard and break the pin, which is blooming difficult, I should think. But yeah, one of the reasons that pin is pushed back is so that if the cable was ever to come out, the comms gets cut off first. So these big power pins are all fully connected, but the comms gets cut off, so the car turns off the charging before the actual power pins get disconnected. So this has all been really well thought about, and the more you sort of look into it, you think it's been really well designed, to be fair. So if we edge this back in again, it will start to charge again. So I'm just going to put this in slowly. Yeah, so the pod point's just clicked, so that's, well, it's locked, the type 2 at that end. Car there, it's clicked the mains on the pod point there. You'll hear the Zoe. There we go. Zoe whines when it's charging, which is nice. And it's ramping up the power. And it's ramping up to 32 amps. So yeah, I've honestly not played with an extension cable before. I've never had the need, to be honest. I've just got an untethered charger and I'll just use whatever cable I need. I've got a long one and I've got a short one. But yeah, this cable, it looks good. I mean, I wouldn't have any concerns using this. It's nicely sealed and it looks like it would be pretty robust. So there's a little drain point. So all EV sockets have drains on them, so that when you get moisture in them, that can drain out. A bit like on this Zoe, there's a little drain down there. Well, in the bottom of this actual Type 2 socket in there, there's one as well. I don't know if I'll be able to show that very easily, but oh yeah, see, just in there, hopefully you can see that, but just there's a little water drain, and the pod point should have one as well. But yeah, this has got one. So probably all I would say is if you've got one of these, obviously they've sealed up because they've used a socket end. So this is where the locking pin would be, but obviously it doesn't have a locking pin. So it's got a little water drain there. So you don't really want it kind of resting up against the wall like that way. But yeah, I mean, you could put this bit kind of undercover somewhere. That's the only thing I would say about extensions and adapters and things like that. Just try and kind of keep this one out of the way of real heavy rain, just to prevent moisture. But I have to say that cable looks good, and I would be happy using it. It doesn't, I mean, we've tried to create a dangerous situation. It's a 32 amp cable. We've put a 16 amp cable behind it and the car drew 16 amps. We weren't able to overload with this. It's not put us in any dangerous, what's the meter? Turn off the meter. It's not put us in any dangerous situations as far as I can work out, and I'd be perfectly happy using that. And I tend to be pretty fussy with stuff like that. So yeah, I hope that was useful. So what I'm going to do is, I don't really need this cable, so it's just going to sit in the cupboard. I was given it just to do a review and have a test and see what I thought of it. I think it's really good. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I am going to give this cable away to a subscriber on the 1st of November. So if you subscribe between now and the end of October, then on 1st of November, I'm going to randomly choose a subscriber. I'm going to tag them so that we can get in contact and offer to send them this cable if they want it. So yeah, thank you to these guys. It was Lexi at MCEV KLN who sent me that just to give a review. There's also a link in the description box for 10% off in their shop. So if you want to buy one of these cables, you can get 10% off. They've got some different cables and they make them for sort of different markets, so not all things will apply necessarily in the UK. Or I should also say I'm going to give it away to someone in the UK because I want to pay international postage. So yeah, a subscriber in the UK can win this cable. Yeah, it comes with a bag, came all well wrapped up and everything. Yeah, I hope that was interesting. If you've got any thoughts about kind of charging theory or any of that, you want me to do any more tests, I'm happy to kind of do anything really, basically, because I've got high voltage gloves, I've got lots of space. Yeah, and I'm just interested in this. Rather than being one of those people who's scared to try anything, I want to try these things and see what happens. If it's going to get hot, I want to know about it, and I want to see it getting hot in a controlled situation so that it's not going to happen when I'm in bed. You know, I want to know that those safeties are in place. And actually, having played with the Type 2 and charging, I've always been really impressed. It's all been really well thought about. And although the original designers didn't intend you to be able to extend Type 2, it's got so many safeties built in that we've not been able to create any worrying situation. So yeah, as I say, I'd be happy using that. So hopefully that's useful. And yeah, any questions or comments, let me know. And if you want to win the cable and you're based in the UK, then subscribe by the 1st of November. All right, catch you later. Cheers.